Hey everybody, it's Minius, and this was one of my original video ideas, which I've been putting off for a while now, because I like to have actual information to speculate off of. And when it comes to the class system in Mass Effect Andromeda, we don't know anything, and I mean it.
Because it's not common knowledge.
Here's the sum total of what I've uncovered about the class system in Mass Effect Andromeda. It's a single tweet that's over a year old and from Chris Wynn, who now no longer works for BioWare. But he was asked what his favorite class and ability were, and he said, "Won't answer the class question yet. Favorite power right now is Biotic Charge." Seriously, that's all we've got. I'd love to read way too much into this tweet and say that his refusal to acknowledge his favorite class means that the class system will be radically different, but I can't do that without completely over-speculating. I know that usually doesn't stop me, but it will in this case. We do know that Biotics will be returning. Of course, in that tweet, we see that Biotic Charge will be back, so Biotic Charge confirmed. You get a bit of Biotics in the EA Play trailer with this mocap ground pound, which looks a lot like what the trailer character did in the announced trailer the year before, only without Biotics. So that ability, even if it is a traditional ability, looks like it's going to be available no matter what class direction you decide to go in. There's also the big Reddit leak that spills another Biotic ability, which might be similar to the Biotic Sphere ability from the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer DLC. But yeah, there's not much to go on, so this isn't so much a speculation video as it is a video that goes over potential class options. So I asked you what you wanted from the class system in Mass Effect Andromeda, and the response was so awesome that I'd like to do this kind of stuff more often. Interestingly enough, what people want from the class system is pretty evenly split among many options. Some of you don't want things to change at all. Some of you like what they've been doing, but want to see it branch out a bit. Others would like something completely new. So let's take a look at some of these options. The easiest and safest thing for them to do is to not change anything. If it's not broken, don't fix it, and the class system in Mass Effect isn't broken. At worst, it's maybe just a little bit dull. If you're watching this, you're probably real familiar with the way things worked in the series, so I'll be brief. Each game had 3 major schools and 6 classes that split off from that. You had Combat, Tech, and Biotics, and you could focus directly in one of those schools as a soldier, an engineer, or an adept, or pick a hybrid class, like an infiltrator, sentinel, or vanguard. That's at least the core of the class system. From Mass Effect 2 on, most classes had a defining ability. Infiltrators had the tactical cloak, sentinels had tech armor, vanguards had biotic charge, and soldiers had adrenaline rush. Andromeda could stick with these 3 schools and 6 classes and probably do fine, but most of us would like to see that expanded a bit. One thing they could do is add some additional classes. The easiest thing to do would be to keep the original formula and have a class that has biotic, tech, and combat abilities. Garrus would like some kind of field medic class, perhaps based off of something like shield boost.
I would have never thought of that.
Ultimately, new class options could be numerous and might depend on what kinds of new abilities the developers think up. And since I'm not a developer or a telepath, it's difficult for me to get a bead on what's coming. A number of you would like to see the introduction of subclasses, perhaps something like in Dragon Age. Maybe if you choose an Adept, you can then turn it into an Adept Destroyer with hardcore damaging biotics, or an Adept Defender with tough barriers and mobile shielding. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of subclasses. I don't know how many of you feel the same way, and if you love the idea of subclasses, it would be awesome if you could give some examples on how it could work in the comments section. Something I'd like to see is the addition of actual ability trees. The Mass Effect games didn't really have this. It was more like skill bar graphs or skill lines that might wiggle a little bit. I'll use a Dragon Age tree as an example. I'm not saying they should copy this specifically, but it could work. You could start off by picking Pole or Singularity. Either would unlock Barrier, Singularity would unlock Shockwave. And then you've got upgrade options for each of these. You can dig into this tree as much as you want, or focus on something else. Okay, this tree is a little wimpy. It could use some passives and some other stuff. I'd prefer something much more extensive, but the point here is that adding actual trees could make specializing your character more interesting, which is something a number of us seem to want. Perhaps the most intriguing option would be the addition of a custom class, or maybe even having no classes at all. This is something I mentioned way back in the Things I Want video. I'd love to be able to pick from all of the abilities, but there is a balance issue here. I also don't care as much about balance in the single player as I should, but even I'll admit that balance games are better. If you can load up on the best abilities, the game can become too easy. Of course, you don't have to load up on the best abilities, but whatever, there are ways around this. For instance, you could balance all of the abilities in the first place. If everything is roughly equivalent to each other, then there won't be top abilities to load up on. You could also make every ability available via skill tree, and then not give you enough points to gain more than a few of the top abilities. My favorite option would be to put abilities in tiers, and then only allow you to choose from so many in each tier. Let's say Adrenaline Rush, Tactical Cloak, Tech Armor, Singularity, and Biotic Charge are all in one tier. Then you should only have the option to choose one of those, and build your character from there. A couple more things on my end that are at least somewhat related to classes. Mass Effect 3's multiplayer added a bunch of new abilities, and I'd love to see some of them worked into the game. The multiplayer also made melee combat both effective and interesting, and I'd love for there to be legitimate melee options, whether it's involved with a class system or not. I'd also like you to be able to specialize in certain weapon types, or at least spec into making, for instance, submachine guns more effective. Personally, I don't mind if the class system gets extremely complicated. Replayability is one of the best parts of Mass Effect, and when I'm going through Andromeda for a second and third time, I'd love to be able to have a completely different playstyle option. But there is something to be said for a much simpler system. I'm just not sure that'll be as interesting.
Huh. No, I hadn't really noticed that. Edie, should I have noticed that?
No, Jet. It is not worth noting.
I want to thank you guys again for your response to this topic. There were a lot of great ideas, and I wasn't able to get to all of them. Here are a couple interesting ideas, though. The Aviator's Mouse would like to see a tutorial session that takes your playstyle into account and then recommends a class that suits you. Adam and a couple of others want the class that you choose to impact the game in additional ways, perhaps allowing you to access areas that other classes couldn't. There were a number of these, and I feel a little bit bad for deleting the old video to focus the views here, so if you had a fantastic idea for classes that I skipped over, like a jerk, be sure to put it in this comment section. Also, I'm curious, whether you are interested in keeping the old system as it is, or breaking the old system down into a more customizable system, how disappointed would you be if they chose the opposite of what you want? I'd prefer a customizable system, but I don't think I'd be that upset with something very similar. When we get actual information, I look forward to going way into detail on classes. And if you like this video, please give it a like. It really helps out the channel. Keep an eye on Minius GC for more Mass Effect videos, but for now...
I should go.